Welcome to Mental Health Uncovered, a show dedicated to having candid, everyday conversations about mental health. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. Welcome back to another episode of Mental Health Uncovered. This is Seth Showalter, your host, and I am thrilled today to be bringing in someone that I have actually had the privilege of interacting with and getting to know on TikTok. His name is Lawrence, and I can say a lot of things about Lawrence just based upon what I have been able to see and interact with on TikTok. But rather than allowing me to provide that explanation, I'd rather you hear from him. So let me jump in and ask you today, Lawrence, how are you feeling?
Oh, I'm good, Seth. Thanks for asking.
Absolutely. Now, I know that you are a retired police officer. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. We really believe in here at Mental Health Uncovered is getting people's stories. And so tell me a little bit about your story. How did you get into law enforcement?
Believe it or not, I wasn't even thinking about being a police officer at all.
Yeah.
But my past history as far as working and career involved people. And actually, my father was telling me he was saying, "Hi, sign up. And I'm like, I'm not interested in being a police officer. My background is, working with people. I was a teacher too for a couple of years. I worked with children with behavior disorders. And, so the bottom line is I just had this incident that happened in front of me. It was a car accident, and people were trying to pull this gentleman out of a car to hurt him. And I actually stopped that. And this light came on in my head, like, this is something you can do for a living.
Yeah.
So I think law enforcement people paid attention to what I was saying, because all I was just saying was just an accident, And after that light came on, and I started looking into law enforcement, and I thought that was for me.
Let me go back, because I didn't realize that you had been involved in working with kids and working with people prior to law enforcement. So tell me a little bit about how everything got started.
Okay, so I work for a big grocery chain store. I don't know if everybody knows, if you're from Chicago, it's this huge store, Jewel Food Store.
Uh-huh.
But I interacted with hundreds and thousands of people for over 10 years. So, whether it be questions or things that happen at home, people flocked to me, and I thought it was awesome. So from there, I actually joined the Air Force, just learn. And discipline was part of my upbringing in the first place. So, and I thought I kind of wanted some school paid for, so I joined the Armed Forces. And then when I got out, I ended up working for Jewel again, but then from there transitioned to teaching for a couple of years with children with behavior disorders.
And what kind of capacity were you working with children?
Like I said, it was just for a couple of years, and it was 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade.
Okay.
And in that area, and those who just they needed more attention, or because of whatever disorder they had, and or most likely half the time was just they needed to focus more on what was going on at school, the dynamics in the education. So that's kind of what I did for a couple of years, and then I transitioned right into the police department.
So it sounds like from working with kids, you immediately developed a heart for people. And then there was this traumatic incident, it kind of sounds like, in which case you witnessed an incident that kind of led you down this path of wanting to lead into law enforcement. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So tell me that journey.
So I'm one of those people that I'm very, very observant. I like to pay attention to everything. So that's the type of person I am. So I can come up with a conclusion, what's really happening, what's not really happening. So that way, and that involves being a parent too. When you're a parent, you do the same thing, right? So anyways, I joined the police department, got in the academy, and a lot of people again, I was on the outside looking in. There was some behaviors I did not like to see. And so I forgot to add that, but there was some behaviors of police officers I didn't like to see. So that was
Okay.
why I was interested in law enforcement. But then when I got in, I understood some of the behavior of why certain things happen with the dynamics in law enforcement. I got it. But it didn't have to be, it didn't have to be permanent, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Yelling at people is not the way to handle every situation, or, pointing the finger at people, things like that. I've seen a lot. And I'm like, wow, before I was in law enforcement, I'm like, that's how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got in, after I got in, went through the academy, excellent training for the most part, excellent training. So, but again, too, I absorbed the training. That's something that's very important when you get inside anywhere, whether it be college or any kind of educational center. It's absorbing the training and believing it, and I believed in it, and I understood it. So when I graduated, it took me a couple of years, and I found a partner who actually was just kind of like me. We just really liked people. We were really we understood people. And a little quick about my background. I grew up in a diversified neighborhood. I was probably like the second black family there. So when I became the police and worked in a troubled, predominantly black neighborhood, that's new to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to get used to different types of behaviors that I wasn't accustomed to. And as far as like, I didn't know what baby mama meant. That was clueless to me. I had to figure that out. When it looked like, name calling, as far as siblings calling each other's, being vulgar, that was friendly in that atmosphere, but not in that house, that wasn't friendly. That was a no-no. That was something I had to adapt to because I'm thinking they're going to fight. And it turned out, that was something I had to rearrange my family thinking dynamics because that wasn't always the case in that area where I worked. And that's something a lot of people, if you don't care about people, you won't try to figure it out.
Right.
Brothers, just people in general, like in certain circumstances, it looked like they were going to fight. They were playing. When we were kids, that wasn't allowed. So I had to kind of think, I had to look at situations and go, okay, they're playing. But if you're one of those people who really are not paying attention or you're not observant, that mentality of how you grew up, you're going to throw that in people's faces. And that's something that I had to correct as a training officer to these new officers. Like, no, different family dynamics. And that's something that was, and I think a lot of times in this situation too, a lot of people, I'll say, black, particular races like black people, they would say white officers are being racist. And then they were being racist because I thought the same way.
So there's a level of cultural integrity in learning about different people groups and how they operate that impacts our behavior, and perhaps that's a big part of the job. I am curious. So you mentioned that you were a training supervisor at one point.
I was a field training officer for the past 5 or 6 years.
Okay. So that became a really, I would imagine that became a really big part of what you did, was actually normalizing some of those behaviors, because I could definitely see why police officers would perhaps act in certain ways if they're not accustomed to the certain cultural norms.
Yes. And that was something, believe it, it's kind of crazy as it sounds. I kind of had to correct that. I had to correct that behavior with new hirees because they, how come they don't call me sir? And, and they're trying to demand it. I'm like, you can't demand something. You can't demand other people's dynamics of how they grew up. In my house, it was yes or no, sir. I didn't expect that from other other people, because they probably grew up like that. And that's something other officers, new hirees had to understand, and as far as,
right.
But that being said, too, you know, I had to explain to. It's hard talking to. How do I explain this? It's hard talking to people who've been in law enforcement for a long period of time and they refuse to change. They refuse to adapt. They have that mentality like that's not how it is. And it's very difficult to talk to them. You know, it's very, very difficult to talk to them, but it's easier to talk to new hirees. So in my opinion, you know, I would let the supervisors deal with, you know, particular behaviors from, you know, those officers. And I dealt with the new hirees because that's what I was, you know, transitioning,
right.
You know, in that perspective, in my law enforcement.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, I feel like we jumped forward quite a bit because we went from joining law enforcement to being a training, but I want to go ahead and jump in here because one of the reasons I wanted to interview you on the show was because of your focus on mental health and really working with people around cultural diversity within law enforcement. I've heard you on several lives, in which case you've talked about this on TikTok. And, you know, police don't have really a good name right now. There's a lot of tension. There's a lot of misunderstanding, let's put it that way, across the board. And so really looking at how supervisors are trying to make a difference to help bridge that divide, I think is really, really important because I think police serve a vital role in our communities and in our society, and we need them. But we also need cultural competency so that people are understood and not automatically assumed to be doing something that they're not.
Right. Completely agree. Yeah, again, it's difficult to get. You know, I call those. I hate to say that word, dinosaur. You know, the dinosaur type thinking. You know, I'm 53 years old, and we have to be willing to adapt. We have to be willing to change. And people, you know, people are, their thought process is all over the place, you know. And so, and in my opinion, when it comes to law enforcement, or health practitioners, whatever we are that we have to serve or work with people, we need to give them you know, we need to understand them. And that, to me, that was really important to me. And, you know, and so, something like, for instance, I know autism is one of the, issues that kind of happened quite a bit, especially in my career. And I had to intervene in some incidences with other officers because they weren't. One of the major factors of law enforcement is just listening and paying attention. That's really the two.
Right.
And I actually I remember this, the gentleman, he was just quiet, wouldn't say a word. And in my opinion, you can clearly see there was something going on there. You know, it was something not right. And the officers kept trying to talk to the guy. And I'm like, and in my mind, I'm like, you can't see that there's something wrong? So I intervened and I start saying hello. And believe it or not, that word hello was impactful. He to respond. So I asked him about where his mom was at, and you can clearly, he started talking. You know, I'm just saying it was a different type of interaction. And in my opinion, the officer and I were the same age. So, and it wasn't because, I don't think it wasn't because he didn't like he just wasn't a people's person. And
right.
And this is not the career, in my opinion, not the career for people who are not people's person.
Right. That's a big deal because we need police officers who are people, you know, we need police officers who actually want to engage. And I think what is often understood is we're so intimidated by police. At least I know I am, right? But if I have a police officer that actually engages me in a conversation and treats me like a person, it changes my entire perspective on that specific incident. And I think that will go a really, really long way at bridging the gap with a lot of the tension that's currently taking place. If we can have police officers start to actually treat people like human beings rather than subjects.
I completely agree, Seth. Again, it's difficult getting. I don't know if you ever saw one of my videos, and one of my videos is about approach when you do a traffic stop. Tell the person why you stopped. Simple as that. It's not really hard. I did it for 20 plus years, so it's not hard to tell the person. You will get particular police officers say that won't work, and if you tell them that where I did it for 20 plus years, I have the other stuff that comes with it too, like you must have worked in a small town, or you must have worked in a nice area. Instead of just trying it, I mean, the police department teaches it. So it is this. You just got that. Yes, the police department teaches it. It's not like that's not new. When I was in the academy, they taught that. Tell them why.
So the police department, police academy teaches one way, but then once police officers get out in the field, they change that up after their own personal experiences, I'm guessing.
I think they have a personal experience. And here's the problem about absorption of knowledge. They tell you it's not going to work all the time. It's going to be a very small percentage. And they probably met that small percentage that day. And they came to the conclusion it just doesn't work. And I'm like, wow, you had that one time and then that was it? I had more. I can tell you 98% of the time it works. And they call it verbal judo, but 98% of the time it works. Yes, you're going to have a small percent of people who are not going to like it. They're going to be against, they're going to be defensive. I get it, but if you still talk to them, you rope them in, you don't have to get to that point where you have to pull them out the car or start demanding things. Most of the time, you're really nice to people. They start talking right away. They start talking about something that happened last year. You're like, what? What did you do? You won that interaction, and that's
right.
That's the goal.
Absolutely. And I mean, one of the reasons I'm so attracted to bringing you onto the show, and one of the reasons I watch a lot of your TikToks, is because you treat people like humans, and we need more of that so much in our society right now, and there's so much tension. I am curious, what do you think has led to the major tension that's currently in play beyond the major incidences that have been traumatic? Right? I mean, I can name a lot of really bad situations that have occurred, and I understand that that's a large play here. But beyond that, what do you think is contributing to the divide between police officers being able to actually do their jobs effectively?
Well, I kind of think this is just my opinion, and I'm gonna give you some observation and experience too. So I'm gonna give the observation experience first. The use of force, whenever you have to put your hands on somebody, it doesn't look nice. And I've discussed that on my TikTok many times. And if you've never been violent in your life, and I'm talking about even as far as wrestling in school, or you've never been in an argument, as soon as you see a law enforcement officer place their hands in a manner, I mean, the use of force, even if you use minimal force, it still looks violent. It doesn't look nice. And people like step back and they can't, they're uncomfortable with it. And I understand. See, I understand it does look uncomfortable. You can't make it look nice. So then some people start forming their opinions about that situation, right? And then they start saying, I wouldn't do it this way. I wouldn't do it that way. And the thing about the use of force, and this is just one factor, okay? There's not all factors, different factors. The thing about the use of force is when you see it on television, it looks perfect. And what people don't know is choreographed. It's by the numbers. 1, 2, 3.
Right.
But on the street, in real life, it's not choreographed.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's very difficult to actually, when you have to, with someone, the majority of people, I'm going to tell you something, the majority of people will comply or cooperate when you have to say, sir or ma'am. If you say sir or ma'am, you have to put your hands behind your back. Majority of people comply. They say, oh, okay, you know, and even if they, they give you a little attention, you can still explain to them, that's another thing too. Not enough explanation, but either way, the majority of people comply, but there's that small percentage that won't, and you have to put your hands on them. You have to use some sort of use of force to put them in handcuffs. And again, it doesn't look nice, and a lot of people, they kind of like, they're uncomfortable with it, and I try to bring that to light about that. Now, another thing too is when white officers put their hands on a black person, and all of a sudden that's racism. But when a black officer does the exact same thing, it's not spoken of. It's no big deal. So why is that racism? I got that a little up too. And I'm also too, and a lot of people think certain things like the two words, immunity. What's the other word?
Qualified. Immunity. Yeah, qualified.
Yeah, a lot of people think that's absolute. And I try to explain that on my live as much because I get a ton of questions about that, and I explain to people officers are not entitled to qualified immunity unless they a reasonable member of the public believes that was the right thing to do, and that's kind of how they, that's what there wouldn't be any lawsuits, officers wouldn't be getting fired or arrested, those things do happen. So I think a lot of the beliefs need to come to light about what is and what isn't, so that people can have a true understanding of what really goes on. And I'm so sorry to say one more thing too. I think a lot of police officers refuse to tell members of the public, what really is. For whatever reason, I'm not sure why. To me, it's a simple explanation about explaining. Because we're human beings. I don't like being told. Explain it to me. We're adults. Explain it to me. It's not hard. And there's some, like, again, as simple as a traffic stop. The reason I stop you, sir, is because you failed to stop at the stop sign. Do you have a driver's license? And simple as that. Now that negates that question, why just stop me? But there are officers who just are so stubborn that they just won't step forward to say, let me show some professional courtesy and just tell them. And that just creates that rift. There's a breakdown communication from there. And then there's that horrible interaction. And I mean, there's a few things which is a lot of those few things are actually a lot that can be changed to actually create that positive community interaction.
Yeah. Talking about that, can we jump in a little bit on mental health for police officers?
Yes.
Because I think that's an important topic for us to talk about specifically on this platform. What's going on there?
I think a lot of police officers, like anywhere else, when you join the armed forces, you really don't think you're going to war. Everybody joins everything for the wrong reason. I mean, I knew what was going on because I had law enforcement in my family, so my father, so I kind of have an idea what was going on in law enforcement. But there's some people you just join because you need, you want benefits, or for whatever, you join for the wrong reasons, and then the real issues kick in, like being shot, someone shooting at someone 10 feet behind you. you're not gonna. It freaks you out. It puts you in another mindset, and it's not a good mindset because you weren't really prepared for it in the beginning, even though you're told about it. Actually having the experience, that's when it comes in of how you are either prepared for it or you're not. Now, obviously, every police officer is. Was I prepared for everything? No, I wasn't prepared for everything, man. I've seen some stuff that I'm glad, hope you've never seen in your life, Seth, or anybody else for that fact. And the very first time, so I will say this: the police department does create a lot of avenues for, in my opinion, for people who have mental health issues in the police department. As far as police personnel, it's up to that individual to either grasp and go with it, because I didn't grasp it, Seth.
Okay, so serious question. Are there consequences for seeking mental health treatment while being in uniform?
As far as I know, no. It's the individual person who feels I'm above that, or I can handle it. I was one of them. I felt that I could handle it. I realized I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
I actually,
mm-hmm.
I myself sought some counseling. It's not, so I think part of it, I don't think there's a stigmatism with someone looking down on you when you have a mental health issue, or I've never felt that. I've just felt it was an individual issue that I can deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's more of the issue than someone looking down on you within the.
Yeah. What about CIT?
Loved it. So I'm going to tell you something that I wanted to be a psychologist.
Oh, did you?
Yes, I did. So I started with a school called the Chicago University of Psychology, something like that, in the city of Chicago. And I thought it would be a good idea to take the crisis intervention training.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Seth, I love the training. Excellent training. Not for me. I realized that there is I don't know how to say this. How do I say this? There's just
Oh, you can say.
They made me feel uncomfortable.
Okay.
It made raise the hairs on my arms of the issues that they were having, and I felt that I was not capable of helping them in that mental health field. Not aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Not do it every single day. Because in law enforcement, you don't have to. You're not encountering someone with mental health issues every day.
No. And I don't think it's meant for you to, I don't think the training is meant for everyday use. It's meant for those situations in which case you do encounter someone, right? But I will note, part of it is making you uncomfortable.
Right.
That's part of it. That's intentional.
Right. But it made me so uncomfortable that I withdrew from the school.
Oh, I did not know that.
Because I knew it was, sometimes you just know.
Right.
Even though you want to help people, maybe that was not for, that career was not for me. I tried earlier in my career. That was not for me. Just some things out of respect. Some people just do it for whatever, the money. I'm not that type of person. When I know it's not for me, it's not for me, so that's kind
of,
I
get it.
Yeah. It really, I don't know if it's okay. One of the people that were there, I think one of the people, she had two disorders, and she actually reenacted one of the voices she heard in her head. Scared me to death.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's intentional. I've actually encountered that myself in activities with training where they try to have you experience it, or at least hear testimonies of what that's like.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is, you can interact. You never know in working in law enforcement when you're going to encounter someone that does have auditory or visual hallucinations. And therefore, you need to at least have some type of understanding of what that's like, so that it helps shape how you're going to interact with that person. But yes, it is uncomfortable. And yes, it does put you in an interesting position. So I understand why you would have some resistance.
Yeah, as far as, like I said, it was great when I was called, I could deal with the situation. It just made me feel uncomfortable where I didn't want to deal with it as a career.
Mm-hmm.
In that area of mental health practitioner. Because there was, I call ourselves the many tool personnel. It helped me in a lot of situations with people who have had mental health disorders. Great training, and I think, and for you that added that, thank you very much. Very, very interesting training, and it served me well. But as far as still again,
okay.
with that, did the officer absorb that training? That's kind of where we're at too with law enforcement. If you with the academy, I gotta say, Chicago Police Academy, they gave awesome training. I don't think there's anything there was something I didn't understand, or as far as there was anything missing. Whatever training he did, it was there. So
yeah,
but it's the belief of individual people. Will that work? That won't work. But you won't know if it doesn't work if you don't try it. These are the things.
Right.
Again, I had more positive encounters. And when I was met with that negative encounter, I was able to deal with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Officers who have the training and they get that negative encounter first, however they deal with it, if it comes out negative, that's how they're going to think for the rest of their career. And that's kind of what my opinion. That doesn't work.
Okay.
And that's kind of how
okay.
I'm not setting that in stone, obviously, but
well, sure.
I think when people have that negative encounter, because I'm still hearing it, look in front. And I always tell people, they're going to formulate, when you stop a person, right? We're just talking about traffic stop. You stop a person, they've already formulated in their head what they're going to do.
True. I attended the CIT banquet every year where they, of course, recognized police officers who had done great work and things like that. But the main thing is we're running out of time here. So I mainly just want to say thank you so much for coming on to the show. Is there anything that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I'm trying to be helpful in the world to bridge a gap between people who actually don't like the police, and I think they just don't understand the police or to understand the dynamics of law enforcement. So I'm just trying to give people what actually happens and what doesn't happen, so we can kind of bridge that gap. And that's all I'm trying.
Well, you're doing a great job at it. And if anyone wants to learn more about you, what's your profile on TikTok so they can follow you?
Retired Police Lawrence D.
Okay. And do you have anything further that you'd like to represent, promote, anything like that?
Right now, Seth, no. I'm working some things out for the future. See if so we can have more of a bridge that gap as far as I don't know. My wife and I are talking about it, so I'm just trying to see maybe as far as T-shirts or something like that, or something nice. Okay. See, it can work. That type.
Well, let me know in case you do, because I'm 100% willing to advertise that on the show. I want to again thank you so much for coming on. We're running out of time, so I just want to say thank you so much, and I really appreciate your time.
I appreciate your time too, Seth. Thank you very much for having me.
You bet. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember that Mental Health Uncovered does not provide any type of therapeutic, clinical, psychiatric, or medical advice, and is intended for entertainment purposes only. If you need such care, I encourage you to find such a professional in your community. You can locate and access your local crisis line by calling 988 Thanks again.
What's that place you've always wanted to try? Well, you're there, sharing plates with
just one bite.
Or on second thought, maybe not sharing. It's that good. When you're with Amex, it's not if it's going to happen, but when. American Express. Don't live life without it.
With Eversense, the long-term sensor helps me spend less time dealing with my CGM. I only need 2 sensor changes a year.
If you're on multiple doses of insulin, you might greatly benefit from the Eversense E3 CGM system, the only continuous glucose monitoring system that lasts for up to 6 months with one sensor. Still doing frequent sensor changes? Break free today with Eversense.
For important safety information and to learn more about Eversense, please visit eversensediabetes.com/safety.
For listening.
With Black Friday savings at the Home Depot, you can get top brand laundry sets with the latest tech to tackle any mess you might face this holiday, like automatic fabric and load size detection for spills of any size, from cookies and milk on your favorite holiday sweater to the toddler of the house discovering just how fun cranberry sauce can be. Make more magic this holiday season. Let your new appliances handle the mess. Shop Black Friday savings and get up to 30% off, plus instantly save up to $750 on select LG laundry sets at the Home Depot. How doers get more done. Offer valid November 2nd through 30th. U.S. only. See store or online for details.